Thank you very much. Are we using this one? Okay, well, we're off to a good start. You know, I wasn't quite sure where to begin. But one of the things that occurred to me is a question I get sometimes from many of you, but oftentimes from my closest friends, which is, Seth, why the hell do you keep doing this? What keeps you going? You know, I was not a political animal growing up. I never came to a town hall like this. I didn't study politics in school. I frankly didn't appreciate the important role that politics plays in our lives, at least not until I was on the ground in the infantry in Iraq. And that's where I felt, for the first time in my life, I really saw the consequences of failed leadership in Washington, often measured in lives. And that fundamentally is what inspired me to run in the first place. There was a day back at my second deployment when a young Marine, a corporal in my platoon, actually said, "You know, sir, you ought to run for Congress someday so that this stuff doesn't happen again." Now, he used a Marine term for stuff, but I think you all understand what he meant. That's how I started. That's why I ran for the first time, saying that we've got to get more done in Washington. But that doesn't exactly answer the question of why I keep doing this, because I didn't even know if I'd like this job when I began. But I'll tell you a quick story. I was speaking to a group much smaller than this of students on the Capitol steps last year. And one of these students, actually a middle schooler, asked me, you know, what do you do that matters to me, was essentially his question. What difference does your work make in my life? And so I decided to talk about what's probably my proudest legislative accomplishment, and that is 988, co-authoring the law to establish the mental health hotline across America. And in its first few months, 988 had some pretty impressive statistics. Calls were up over 50% just because we had this 3-digit hotline. Texts were up over 1,400%, which is an amazing measure of how many younger Americans, especially since they're the ones who text, are getting help from 988 in a time of crisis. Of course, it's also a sad measure of the youth mental health crisis that we know is rampant across America. But you know what? Statistics don't impress middle schoolers. That's what I realized. These middle schoolers were not very impressed by these statistics. So I took my picture, and I don't know if I really answered the kid's question or not. But then a woman from another group came up, and she said to me, "Sir, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I'm very sorry to interrupt. But I just want you to know that your law saved my daughter's life." And then she introduced me to her 13-year-old daughter. That's the kind of impact that people like me try to have in lives. And I think it's an important reminder that for all the dysfunction in Washington, for all the frustration with Congress, which is very well-founded, I mean, trust me, I'm very frustrated with Congress myself. I'm extremely frustrated with this administration myself. But for all of that, Congress is still the only Congress we have. It's the government we have, and we've got to make it work. And part of making things work in a democracy is participating in a democracy. And that's why it means so much that so many of you are here. You know, some familiar faces like the former mayor of Newburyport, who's done more than her share of public service in her life and doesn't need to come to another town hall. I'm sure you hosted many yourself, Mayor. Others who are...
We're here because we want to talk. We want to share our views.
Others who... So my district director very calmly asked you to follow some really basic ground rules, and we'd really appreciate it if you would, all right? So other people who are here for the first time, students, a few, it matters to participate in democracy. So I want to first of all thank you for showing up. And we do have a great turnout. And we will get to your questions. Because I can't do my job representing you, working for you. My team and I, we all work for you if we don't hear from you. And that's why I've held, I think, more town halls than just about anyone else in the country. I know there are a lot of Republicans, you probably saw my Instagram post, who are canceling town halls and refusing to hold them. But we're happy to be here. Before I get to questions, I do want to give a quick update because there's so much news of the day. And my job here is not to preach to you about Trump. I know there are people who voted for him and a lot of people who voted against him. There are some people here who probably didn't vote at all. But I will say that as a citizen, as a father, as a veteran, I am very concerned about the ways that this administration is carrying out its priorities. Now, last night, the Senate passed a continuing resolution to keep government open, so there won't be a government shutdown, but I voted against it. And I was asked, I was asked by someone, well, Seth, if you were in the Senate, how would you have voted? And I said, I would have voted exactly the same way on exactly the same bill. This is just a different time. I have often, as have many Democrats, crossed the aisle to keep government open, sometimes when Republicans needed to be bailed out from their own extremists to do the right thing for our country. But this is a different time, and we need to hold this administration accountable because they are not listening to the courts and they are not deferring to Congress in our constitutional role to control the power of the purse and decide what the budget looks like. So that's why I think we should hold the budget. Now, there's another process going forward. I won't go into detail because I do want to get to your questions, but it's the reconciliation process with the Republican budget. And this is what you'll hear the debate about with the tax cuts versus the Medicaid cuts. But basically what they're trying to do is to make massive cuts in the federal government in order to fund Trump's tax cuts for billionaires and the largest corporations. And the reason I think that's unfair is not because I hate billionaires. That sounds like fun, wouldn't mind being a billionaire, but because we all ought to pay our fair share. They already pay some of the lowest tax rates in the country. They don't need another tax cut at the expense of Medicaid. And let's just be clear, there's no way mathematically for this administration to pass this budget without significant cuts to Medicaid. That's going to affect a lot of people here in Massachusetts. 1 out of every 3 kids in Massachusetts relies on Medicaid. So it's a huge impact. Now, over the last 6 weeks, we've seen a lot of chaos. About 62,000 federal employees have been fired. We've had tariffs on this, tariffs on that, then rescinded on this, rescinded on that, just total economic chaos. There are places where tariffs can work and be helpful to level the playing field so that other nations and their workers compete on the same level that we do. But this chaos has been really harmful to the economy. Of course, our foreign policy has been in disarray, and many of you have seen how I've been very outspoken about the president and the vice president and how they handled Zelensky and how they're handling a number of foreign policy crises around the globe. Thank you. There are about 120 lawsuits already. We're not even at 100 days yet, folks. There's already 120 lawsuits working their ways through the courts. And while I love the idea of making government more efficient, in fact, my very first bill was literally a government efficiency bill. It should be one of Elon Musk's favorites. I haven't gotten a complimentary tweet yet. But the way he's going about it is not only devastating to the federal workforce, devastating to all of you who, for example, might want to call the IRS for help on your tax return in the next few weeks, good luck with that when they're just slashing the workforce. Good luck getting your Social Security check if there's a problem with it and it's not on time, because it's going to be very hard to get someone on the other end of the line. My office will still help you, of course, but that's going to be hard. There are a lot of things where you're going to see the immediate result is government is less efficient because we fired a lot of people. They've also managed to fire some of the best people, because when they give these buyouts, who do you think takes the buyout offer? People who have better options, right? So a lot of the folks who've already left are the ones who are leaving to get higher paying jobs elsewhere. They showed up in the first place to serve the federal government. And when I was speaking to a college 2 weeks ago, there were a lot of students who said, you know, I wanted to work for the federal government, I wanted to serve the country, and now I question whether I should. And that's really sad, not just for today, but for the future of our country. So we need to be a lot smarter about how we're doing this. And of all the different things that we're watching, including cuts to mental health grants, 988 staffing, that's something obviously very important to me. NIH grants, which are so critical to our local, not just researchers and everything, but our local economy, and cuts to the VA. I made a commitment to continue going to the VA for my own health care, which I still do today, and we're going to see those cuts. There are veterans who will die on waiting lists again because of what Musk is doing. Musk is killing veterans with these cuts, and I'm going to do everything in my power to stop it. Now, everything in my power does not mean controlling the House and the Senate, because Democrats lost this past election. This is not a political event, so I don't want to get too much into the politics of all this, but I will say that I think an important thing I'm also doing is trying to make some reforms in my own party so that we have a more, just let's say, balanced government in the future. That's important as well. So with that introduction, let me turn it over to you and to your questions, and I will ask you to please be respectful, not just of me and your fellow citizens, but of my team. And I've heard some disturbing reports already of how people have been rude to my team here today. That's not a good way to treat people who are working for you as your public servants. So please be polite. And I look forward to your questions. Okay.
Hi, I'm Neva Partel. I'm a junior here at Masconomet, and I'm also the student representative from my school today.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. So our school has issues with having enough money and funding for teachers, and are resort to cutting student-facing teachers, administrative positions, and even student resources at our school. And the current administration today is looking to dismantle the Department of Education, which will likely worsen these problems. But it's not just Masco. Schools all around the district and Massachusetts are facing the same issue. So how can we together work to ensure we have a quality education and resources for a continued successful education in our schools?
Thank you very much for that question. You know, there are all sorts of principled reasons to invest in education. I've got 2 kids at home. I really care about their education. We all have people that we really care about their education, in our families. There's also just a really good economic reason. Like, there's no better return on investment for America than investing in our kids, than investing in education. And countless studies have shown that. It's one of the reasons I'm honored to be here in an important school in our district that I'm very proud to represent. So what can you do? One thing you can do is just make sure all the voters out here who are not sitting in your seat going to school understand the impact of these cuts. Social media, it has its ills. We have our challenges with social media, but it's also very democratizing in that you can tell a story. And you can get the story out of how these cuts will impact your education, your friends, what you're trying to learn and accomplish at a school like this. So make sure that you're telling those stories. And if we can help in my office, you let me know. And we'll amplify, we'll amplify good Instagram posts and things like that, right? The other thing that I think is important is there are a lot of discussions and debates going on in towns like this about what the future of education looks like. And this is controversial because one of the issues, for example, is that we have lines out the door at vocational technical schools and a lot of debates about how to fund them. And I'll be honest, I have some disagreements with the ways that some local leaders are advocating dealing with this. Many want to put caps on voc ed. Many do not want to expand schools. Many are very concerned about how these will impact local budgets. But you know what? I think kids ought to have the opportunity to get the education that they want. I mean, the market's saying something when kids really want to go to these great schools. You know, and there's a lot of concerns. A lot of kids are concerned about the impact of AI, for example. AI is going to be taking the jobs of paralegals, of computer programmers, of accountants. But you know what you're not going to see AI do anytime soon? Is fix that light bulb. We're still going to need a lot of electricians, a lot of plumbers. And so a lot of kids are smart to want to go to these innovative schools right now. And I think Massachusetts should be expanding options, expanding seats, giving more opportunity for kids to go to these schools, than cutting back just to maintain the status quo. So that's an example of a place where you might be able to really weigh in, not just on what's happening today, but how the decisions being made by cities and towns right here in Massachusetts can affect the educational opportunities for tomorrow. So thank you very much for your question, and thank you very much for coming today.
Good afternoon, Congressman. My name's Margaret O'Malley. I live up in Gloucester.
Thanks for coming.
I'm a retired nurse. Thanks so much for all you do. I'm here because I'm literally beside myself with anxiety about what is happening in the United States. It's so reminiscent of the Third Reich and what happened with And I have to say that, not you personally, but you and others, the Democrats in Congress, have left me, and I think a lot of Americans, without a voice. And I think we have to be warriors now. And we have to understand the enormity of the evil that we're facing and be as strong and stronger than they are. And that's a tough order. But the people of the United States, the vast majority of them, don't want what's happening in Washington, D.C. They thought they did. They thought they wanted the old Trump. But the new Trump and his minions, who are completely, evil, are decimating our democracy. And I don't see any Democrats. And I know in the British system, they have something that's called the loyal opposition. And they stand up on a daily basis. If they're unhappy with what the majority is doing, they stand up on a daily basis in a respectful way of the citizens, not of the baboon in the White House, and say why this is wrong. The Congress has seemed to go dark. It seemed to go quiet, the Democrats in Congress. And this is a time when we really need a vigorous opposition. And please remember what happened in Germany. It happened quickly. And we can't wait till next year when people start campaigning. It could be too late by next year. We need to be fighting now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. very well said. You may have been a nurse, but you could be a speaker as well. So thank you very much for the question. I wholeheartedly agree with you, but let me just go through some of the points that you mentioned. Now listen, I'm no stranger to controversy. I've often said things that are controversial. One of the first things I said early on in my time in Congress that was very controversial was when I compared the rise of Trump to the rise of Hitler. And I'll tell you, I got roundly criticized when I was the first member of Congress, House or Senate, to say what you just said. And I tell you, I still believe it today. It's very, very concerning. There's a new Hitler biography out that talks about, or newish, that talks about how he rose in this democratic system. And when you look at the things that happened, like the media being co-opted, look at the settlements that the major news corporations are making with the administration, just giving in. Look at the lack of criticism across the board. The way that there's a sort of cult-like following to what Trump says. The way that his own party, this is really important, his own party suddenly starts justifying everything he does, right? I mean, I said this after the Zelensky meeting, that there's this, it happens all the time, where Trump will do something totally unconscionable to any Republican with any sense of morality or intelligence or history, like kowtow to Putin. And it takes usually about 2 hours, for all these Republicans around him to somehow spin up justifications for it, to make excuses for it. And I had my team check. I said, how much time elapsed between the time we saw Marco Rubio, slinking back in the couch, to when he put out some crazy tweet somehow justifying what just happened in the Oval Office, and it was 1 hour and 40 minutes. That's what's going on here. And, well, I'm getting to it. Please be patient. I was very patient with your long question. All right? All right. And we also see, my point is, I'll be brief. My point is that there are actually a lot of frightening parallels. And I want to mention one other which is really important, which is the way that we're handling some of the foreign policy threats around the globe. Because when Chamberlain went to appease Hitler, the way that we seem to be trying to get peace with Putin through appeasement, Churchill had an interesting quote. He said, "You had a choice between war and dishonor. You chose dishonor, and you will get war." I am very, very concerned about the way that this, and we don't even barely have time to think about this because of all the crazy things happening right at home, but I'll tell you, the way that we're dealing with Putin in Europe is unconscionable, and it sets a precedent around the globe that if you disagree with America, we might just bring you in as friends. Like, thank God we killed Osama bin Laden before Trump was president, because he probably would have tried to make friends with him, and the vice president would have followed. And that's why I was not afraid to say what I think was very explicit about that Oval Office meeting, and yes, I've gotten criticized for this too, that I think Trump and Vance behaved like cowards, like absolute cowards, betraying our values, our national security, and I will not put up with that. Now thank you. I am perfectly willing to take your criticisms, and the gentleman sitting a couple seats away from you is obviously very frustrated. I hear that, and you can all say, hey, we should do more, all right? I'm out there, I'm saying things that a lot of other Democrats are not willing to say. I want you to follow me on Instagram for all the stuff that we're putting out in the way that we're speaking very publicly about these challenges. But the other thing that we have to do, you want us to be warriors? The other thing we have to do is we have to start winning. We have to start winning elections, because elections have consequences. And I'll tell you, again, this is not political, so I'll mention this very briefly. But Serve America, my organization, when we were in the same situation in the first Trump term, he controlled the White House, the House, and the Senate, and we had a chance in the midterms to put a check on Trump. More than 50% of the seats that Democrats flipped in the entire country were my Serve America folks. There's not a member of Congress, House, or Senate who can say that he or she did more in 2018, and we intend to do it the same in 2026. We have to put a legislative check on Trump, not just a rhetorical check, not just screaming and shouting and being willing to host town halls and take your shouts and criticism. We have to win. We have to win. And until Democrats wake up and realize we can't just keep doing the same old losing playbook, we're not going to win. So that's why I'm fighting so hard to make sure we win elections as well. Okay.
Okay, we have a question out in the back.
Part of my hope coming in here today is that we can show that Massachusetts is better than these Republican districts, and we can actually have a really good discussion, and we can have some serious debate, and you can disagree with me, whether you're a supporter or not, whether you voted for me or voted for someone else or didn't vote at all, but let's just have a civil discussion, okay? Thanks. Okay,
Hi,
please.
thank you for coming
back there.
today and answering questions. I
You're
work
welcome.
for a company on the North Shore here. We employ about 25 people. For 45 years, we've been creating and importing beautiful products from Mexico out of recycled aluminum. We've survived recessions and COVID. We're not sure we can survive this. And we just are looking for some help on how we could reclassify our recycled aluminum tabletop, i.e. mostly frames. Is there anyone you know that could help us?
Okay, can I just, this is dangerous, but can I take a wild guess?
Yes.
Mariposa?
Yes!
Right. Fantastic.
I have a catalog here.
I know a lot of fans.
Thank you.
So, look, I'll be honest with you. I don't know the exact answer to your question, but we will find out.
Thank you.
And it's a great example of why it's important not just to come to town halls, but to reach out to my office, because we take on a lot of these cases. For example, we just took on a constituent case for Marblehead, where a constituent works for a company that was doing mental health research on veterans to reduce suicide. And guess what Elon Musk said? Mental health research to reduce suicide, to reduce veteran suicide, was, quote, non-essential. That's what Doge said. That's what Musk said. And as you know, we don't have a lot of checks and balances on Doge. That's one of the reasons that I voted against this budget. But nonetheless, we were able to work through the system and somehow get this contract reinstated at the VA. So we will do everything that we possibly can, despite not controlling the levers of power in Washington, and we will happily take on your case. So follow up. I know you'll be polite because you've been very polite to me. I appreciate it. Follow up with my team afterwards, and we'll do whatever we can to assist.
Thank you so
All right?
much.
Good luck.
I have the next question, please.
Nisha, okay.
Congressman Moulton, my name is Brian Cabral. I am a Topsfield resident, 8-year active duty, 5-year reserve with the United States Navy.
Thank you.
I went through officer candidate school in Pensacola, Florida, with our friends, the Marine Corps drill instructors. Sir,
I'm sure that was enjoyable.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. My question is very specific for you.
Okay.
I am a 31-year veteran of a major U.S. airline. I've reached out to your office several times with regard to the compulsory age 65 retirement rule. I am currently a Boeing 787 captain. I typically fly to Delhi, India, and Cape Town and Johannesburg, South Africa, nonstop. I respectfully request that you revisit your position on the age 65 retirement. I feel that rule is arbitrary and discriminatory, quite frankly. I grew up in this town. I've known other veterans who have been forced to retire who had several years at least of good service. It is a different industry. Our flight operations manual has a flow chart. There are approximately 29 decision makers that go into every flight. Everyone has to give a thumbs up. The chain of safety, that 29-link chain, has at least 6 links of exceptionally junior personnel. The industry would benefit from extending it, extending the age, and at least taking advantage of the experience while we transition a significant number of new people into their roles and get their feet underneath them. Sir, if you knew what I knew and you saw what I saw, you would change your position. The day of that Toronto plane crash, I was returning from a trip to Lisbon, Portugal. The winds were approximately 29 knots at Newark, with gusts to 42 knots. I was flying with an exceptionally junior co-pilot. It was his turn to land. And I basically said, I'm sorry, I'm going to take this landing. The conditions are too difficult. And perhaps that may be that degree of experience, those kind of judgments, perhaps might have carried the day for those poor folks up in Toronto. But that's it, sir. I just want to take a moment of your
appreciate
time.
that. Thank you.
It's a very specific.
I understand.
And sir,
Yeah.
Just to say hello, I'm a good friend of the Rosanos out of Wellesley.
Oh, no kidding. Oh,
Brian's
great.
a good
Thank
friend of
you.
mine. He texted me before I came.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. The crowd's already very generously thanked you for your service, but I certainly appreciate it as well. And this is an example of an issue that, I mean, yes, it's sort of narrow. It was one actually amendment vote on a committee vote that then went into a larger bill before the Congress. You know, we take hundreds of amendment votes every year. It is one that I took seriously, and I listened to various experts on this who talked about things like the fact that the international age limit is actually lower than what the U.S. pilots are asking for. That wasn't the case when the last time we raised the age limit, and also citing some studies that just, I would love to have you in charge of my airplane, but you know, maybe not everybody is still at peak performance at 65. But look, we will take a look at that. I'm happy to. And any time that a constituent like yourself has new information, a new perspective to share, we want to hear it. So again, follow up with my team so we can kind of understand exactly what your arguments are and the implications for the rest of the workforce. And I will certainly bear that in mind the next time this comes up for a vote. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm
Thank
a
you.
little nervous. I've never done this before.
That's okay.
My name
That's
is
okay.
Seth.
Take your time, but do just, if you can, bring the microphone a little closer. Yeah,
My
thank you.
name is Gail. I'm from Rockport. Of the many alarming things Trump has said, the most chilling is vote this one last time and you'll never have to vote again. What are they planning besides the SAVES Act? They have been chipping away at the Voting Rights Act for years. Had they not, I truly believe he would not have won in 2024. Many votes maybe weren't rigged, but they were prevented. I know we are working to gain seats in 2026, but what are Democrats doing now to protect voting rights, to pass the John Lewis Act? And how much do I have to worry that Trump's promise that we'll never have to vote again will come to pass?
Okay, well, thank you. So first of all, I don't know if it was first time luck or not, but you did a great job. So come again, ask another question. Look, I'll be honest with you, I think I would love to stand here and tell you, hey, we've got this under control, there's nothing to worry about. I'm not going to say that. I think this is a legitimate concern. One of the things about autocrats or wannabe autocrats is that they tell you what they're going to do. You know, remember all the people who said, oh, Putin's not really going to invade Ukraine? I mean, I was in Kyiv 2 months before the invasion. I heard Americans and Ukrainians on the ground, a lot of them who said, no, he's not really going to invade, maybe another thing in the east, but he's not actually going to try to invade the entire country. That's crazy. But Putin said he was going to do it. He wrote about it. He said this is important for Russia. We hear the same things. Trump says he's going to do this. He says it's important for America. And one of the things out of the autocrats' playbook, back to this question about the 1930s, is having some incident happen that suddenly means you're declaring a national emergency. Well, let's look at the national emergencies that have already been declared. The president has declared a national emergency at the southern border. Now, I'm a Democrat who has, for years, said we have a problem at the southern border when other Democrats have refused to acknowledge that. But when crossings are at absolute lows for the past 5 years, it's a little hard to say that there is a national emergency right now. The president has also declared a national emergency over energy. And yet, America has never produced more domestic oil and gas, more domestic energy, than under the Biden administration. So you can have challenges or problems with the Biden administration's energy policy, but it's a little hard to argue there's a national emergency when we've never produced more domestic energy. What happened in the 1930s is there was a fire at the Reichstag. And it was not clear exactly how this started. The police turned up evidence that it was started by some Nazis, and those police officers soon turned up dead. But however it started, it was a pretext for Hitler to declare a national emergency, and for the Congress, Parliament in this case, the Bundestag, to give away a lot of its powers to the president. Hard to imagine that with this Republican Congress, right? No, it's not. They're completely subservient. So I think that this is an issue that we do have to be worried about. There are some things happening behind the scenes where Democrats are working on legal strategies to prevent this, but honestly, I think we need to do more. And there's a lot going on right now, but you deserve a better answer to that question in the coming days, because I share your concerns, and I don't think the analogies are so far-fetched. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, Congressman. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
So my name is Ivy, and I live in Marblehead.
It's a good town. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad I got in. It was a big line. I'm very concerned about the erosion of our civil liberties under Trump, and particularly the illegal detention of Mahmoud Khalil, a green card holder. A green card holder who was kidnapped from his Manhattan apartment 1 week ago today and shipped away to Louisiana to await an immigration hearing in a private prison. I saw that you made a statement defending our constitutionally protected right to free speech and freedom of assembly, and I appreciate that. However, actions speak louder than words. I listened to the last town hall you posted almost in its entirety, and in response to an audience question about your support for Israel, you mentioned letters you have written and statements you have made criticizing Israel's military operation in Gaza. However, I didn't hear a yes or no answer as to whether you will continue to send Israel money and weapons to continue its genocide against the Palestinian people. So my question today is twofold. Number one, what concrete actions will you take before the next election, because I think we're right that we don't have a year and a half or however long to wait, 2 years to wait. What concrete actions will you take before the next election to protect our right to free speech and freedom of assembly? And yes or no, will you commit to halting weapons aid and funding to the State of Israel, which continues to kill Palestinian civilians every day in violation of the ceasefire? Yes or no?
Well, let's get the easy one out of the way first. No, I'm not going to cut off all aid to Israel. I'm not. I think, first of all, that having a relationship with allies means that you use influence and leverage, and we have lots of relationships with allies that we disagree with. Look, I spent a lot of time on the ground in the Middle East working with allies that we had staunch disagreements with. It's not a perfect world working with allies, but to paraphrase Churchill again, the only thing worse than working with allies is to work without them. And so I think it's important that we maintain our relationships with allies while at the same time being absolutely willing to hold them accountable the way we would hold any other ally accountable as well. There are a lot of allies that we support around the world, Egypt is another one, for example, that have questionable human rights records. And we have to use the leverage that we have, the relationship we have, to try to influence their behavior. I have been very outspoken about my criticism of how Israel is carrying out its response to October 7th, an absolutely heinous, horrific terrorist attack on its country, carried out by an organization, Hamas, that has genocide written into its charter, to be clear. But despite the horrific nature of the attack, I have been very willing to criticize, including going to Israel to criticize the Prime Minister in person with how he's carrying out this response. Because everyone in the Middle East, whether you're Israeli, Palestinian, or anyone else for that matter, deserves peace, not bombs. And we've got to find a pathway forward to get there. So there's a lot that Israel has tried to do right in this war, but there's also a lot that I've been willing to say, this is not going to help you or the cause of peace. And I've spoken out so vehemently in some cases, I've even called for Prime Minister Netanyahu to resign, something that some people forget. But I want to get to your other question because it's such an issue of the day, and I did recently release, I think, a very strongly worded statement about the administration acting illegally to basically just squash dissent, to say if you're someone that we disagree with, you can just be deported. Because they have not been able to cite a law that this person has broken. Now, let me be clear. I strongly disagree with his support for Hamas. He praised the horrific attack on October 7th. He praised that. And yes, he did. And you can look up the quotes. So I disagree with that strongly. But the point should not be to shout at me about what he said. The point is to preserve free speech. Because even if you disagree with what he said, he deserves the protections of the law. Because we are a country of laws. And no one should be above the law. So when the president says, I disagree with him, so we're going to use whatever laws in the books to disappear him, which is what's going on here, or when the president says, well, for all my supporters who agreed with me, there's no problem with trying to overthrow the country, assaulting Capitol police officers, killing people in their path on a literal wartime rampage of the United States Capitol. Well, since they agree with me, they don't have to follow the law, and so they're set free. That's not acceptable either. And I will be very Look, Ivy, if you can point to some specific concrete actions that you think the Democrats in Congress should be doing to maintain, within the bounds of the law, because we're not going to start breaking the law to uphold the law, then we're open to hearing those suggestions. But I will tell you that we will do everything, and I think I can speak for House Democrats in general here, we will do everything in our power to make sure that the law is upheld. A lot of the lawsuits, the 120 lawsuits already in progress, are in part the work of House Democrats, and we've signed on. I've personally signed on to a number of amicus briefs, for example, to support this effort to hold the administration accountable. But it is going to be tough when they don't seem willing to basically regard the law. Okay, sorry, who's next? Danielle. Okay.
My name is Mike Dwyer. I'm from North Andover, Massachusetts.
Thank you for coming, sir.
First of all, I want to compliment you for taking point again. I think it's difficult to imagine anybody else in Congress standing up and doing what you've been doing. You're like the lone man in the wilderness. But I also want to remind everyone in this gathering, we need 5 seats to take over the House. We don't have a problem because we got all the Democrats here, but find people to support. 5 seats, 3 of which are in April in Florida. So you can do all your yelling and all your angst and all your emotions, but you can also get online and send them $20. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You know, I think some people forget, since I'm always looking at people who are running against me on the right and the left. I mean, it's a democracy, so hey, bring it on, it's fine. But I think some people forget that this district used to be a frontline district for Democrats. That means that every year the Democratic Party across the nation had to pour millions of dollars into this seat just to keep it Democratic. We've now become a district that helps other districts across the country through Serve America. So I can't ask for money, but thank you very much for that reminder.
I have the next question right here, actually from someone from our youth council.
Hi.
How are you?
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for coming.
My name is Danya de la Cruz. I am a senior at Lynn English High School, and I am the proud daughter of 2 Guatemalan immigrants.
Glad to have
you. My mom actually worked in cleaning this auditorium yesterday to prepare for your arrival.
Oh, wow. Thank you to your mom.
I'm very proud of my heritage, and for that reason, I feel the same fear I did in 2016, hearing so much negative conversation surrounding my parents and surrounding my rights as a American citizen. So my question for you today is, what are you doing, what is Congress doing to protect the rights of children of immigrants, and what are you doing to change the conversation surrounding immigration?
Great question. Well, let me just say, as an American, we're proud to have you. So thank you very much. And you know, what's so often lacking, in Congress especially, but in our whole political conversation these days, is really courage. And people often ask me, Seth, why is Congress so stupid? I mean, how can Congress not believe in climate change or whatever the issue is, right? And my observation is that actually most of my colleagues are pretty smart. And what's lacking in Congress is not intelligence, but just the courage to say the truth. You know, to speak out when people in your party may disagree with you, to just be willing to have debates, which is one of the causes I've taken on with the Democratic Party. We ought to be able to discuss contentious issues. And the courage that you just showed to stand up as a daughter of immigrants who might very well be targeted by this administration, and to speak out and to ask a great question in a very public town hall, I admire that. So thank you. There's a couple of different levels at which we're operating here. I mean, one thing is you're going to see us Democrats, and myself certainly, speak out very clearly, like I did in the case of the Palestinian activists, to say we have to follow the law and uphold the law. But there's a couple of things happening behind the scenes as well. My office works very closely. We've developed relationships over time with the law enforcement agencies that have to carry out these orders. And so those relationships matter and have had an effect in the past in making sure that only the people who deserve to get deported go, and the people who deserve and have a lawful right to stay here, stay here. And we have intervened in many cases in the past, and we will continue to do so despite the threats from the administration to the contrary. The second thing that we're doing is I'm talking with my colleagues to try to get some sense into them about having good immigration policy. Don't forget, there was a bipartisan, an imperfect, but bipartisan immigration bill in the Senate, largely negotiated by Republicans, but supported by both sides of the aisle, that was ready to get passed when one man, Donald Trump, said, nope, I want to make this an election issue. In other words, I want to politicize it, and so you're not going to pass it, and the Republicans caved in. But the point is that we need Democrats who are willing to work on immigration, not deny it, not refuse to talk about it, Those of you who read my op-ed in the Washington Post a couple months ago about the need to have tough conversations as Democrats might remember the example I used of asking someone running for a Democratic messaging position, what do you think we should say about immigration? And hearing the response, oh, Seth, we shouldn't talk about it. We shouldn't talk about it. Shouldn't talk about it at all. That is not the right answer, in my humble opinion. We need to engage on this issue, and that even means engaging with Republicans, although some of that has to go on behind the scenes right now because their public stances are so extremist. The third thing we're going to do is we're just going to continue in a very public way providing information to people like your family who want it and need it. And we are not going to be intimidated by the Trump administration when they, again, threaten the basic free speech of just my office in providing immigration information to people about what it means to follow the law and what rights and protections you are afforded in this country. We will continue to do that as well.
Okay, everyone.
And the final thing is that you're in this district, we work for you. I mean, you don't need to hear this, but I want everyone else to hear it. Come to us with your issues. We've won an award in our office for the best constituent services in the entire country, House or Senate, all right? So we're gonna keep doing that. Doesn't mean we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we are always getting feedback and looking for improvement. That's actually why we've gotten this well, because we take feedback so seriously. But the point is that we will take on your cases and do everything that we can to help. So if you need specific help, come to my office. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, this will be our last question of the afternoon.
Hello, Congressman. My name is
Hi.
Esther. I live in North Reading.
Thanks for coming, Esther.
You're welcome. Thanks for having this town hall. I've got a burning question. I think that's been very pointed and on my mind since this started. Does Elon Musk have the legal authority to cut and slash and burn the way he has been? Because I don't think he does.
No, he does not.
And I feel like I'm not hearing a lot from the Dems condemning
Sure.
that.
Yeah. You're certainly going to continue hearing a lot from me. I mean, I am not afraid to talk about the stakes here. I guarantee you, something I said earlier in this town hall, I'll get hit on for, which is to say, when I said, quote, Musk is killing veterans with his cuts. That, for example, is something that a lot of people will object to. I said it because I believe it. I'm not trying to be extremist or alarmist. I just think that that's really going to happen because of my own experience at the VA and what I see him doing and the impact I know this will have on our fellow veterans. So we have to find ways with the power of our speech, with the power of whatever we can do in the minority in Congress to really try to hold Musk accountable. But I want to say this is a good example of a place where you all can help, because so many people in America are saying, Democrats and Republicans, by the way, are saying, I'm really scared. I want to get involved. What can I do to help? And part of what Democrats need to do, and I'll admit we need to do better with this, is provide you more outlets, because you want to get involved. You're here. One place where you really can have an impact on the conversation is just by documenting the impact that these DOGE cuts are having on Americans' lives. Put it on social media. Send it to me so I can share these stories. So the next time, when I'm on MSNBC or CNN or Fox or wherever, I can talk about this stuff. Or podcasts, by the way. We're doing a lot more podcasts. A good lesson learned from Democrats in the last election, we weren't doing enough podcasts. I've been recording a whole bunch. The last time I did a podcast was yesterday afternoon. So we're going to do a lot of this, and it really helps to have these stories. So if you're, whatever it is, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, tell these stories. And don't just talk about, the people getting fired, although those are devastating, but talk about the impact that those firings have. Explain to people that this isn't making government more efficient. It's making government non-existent, and that's going to hurt Americans, whether you're just trying to get a tax return or you're trying to get treatment for the cancer you got in Iraq from a burn pit. Treatment expanded, by the way, under the Biden administration. A lot of the reasons the VA has increased its size is because they're serving a lot more patients, because Biden made people eligible for care that they need and deserve but weren't getting before. So we need to do more. We owe you some better answers or some more answers for how you get involved, and you'll hear those from me in the coming weeks and months. But I also want you to know that that's a place where you can really make a difference. We can all be storytellers. We can all talk about the impact that these things are having on the lives around us. And that is really important for our democracy as well. So thank you very much. Thank you all for coming here this afternoon. And let me say this, this is the first time we've done a town hall in a while where we haven't heard as much from the pro-Trump folks. But the bottom line is that my team and I, whether you like what you heard or you don't like it or you think it could be better or whatever else, we work for you. And we will continue doing so. Thank you very much.